She had always known the world around her didn't see her the way she saw herself. In the military unit, everyone had a role, and roles came with respect or the lack of it. She was a medic, trained to save lives, to move quickly under fire, to make split-second decisions that could mean the difference between life and death. Yet, in the eyes of her fellow soldiers, she was just a medic. It was as if the very word confined her. As if anyone who wasn't on the front lines shooting or leading couldn't be brave or strong. Every morning, as she put on her uniform and strapped on her gear, she felt the weight of their judgment more heavily than the weight of her backpack. The teasing started small at first. In the barracks, when she tried to participate in planning missions, some soldiers would snicker, exchange glances, and mutter things under their breath. She's just a medic. She doesn't know anything about real combat. The word stung, not because she doubted herself, but because she knew they didn't know her. They hadn't seen her in training, hadn't watched her sprint across a field with a wounded teammate on her back, hadn't seen the calmness in her eyes when chaos erupted around her. Yet their mockery was constant, a chorus of doubt that followed her everywhere. She could have responded with anger or frustration, but she didn't. She had learned long ago that proving people wrong wasn't always about shouting louder. Sometimes, it was about showing them quietly, step by step, through action. In every drill, every training exercise, every day in the field, she pushed herself harder than anyone else. When others took breaks, she kept going. When others complained about exhaustion, she kept moving. She knew that one day, when it mattered most, no one's opinion would matter. Only her skills and her courage would. Despite the mockery, she tried to maintain a sense of humor. Sometimes she laughed along with the others, making jokes about herself to defuse tension. But deep inside, she was observing, learning, and preparing. Every glance of doubt, every smirk, every whispered insult became fuel for her determination. They thought they could define her by her role, but she knew that being a medic was not a limitation, it was a weapon. A weapon of precision, intelligence, and resilience. She could save lives in ways that many of the so-called frontline heroes could not, and she was determined to prove it when the moment came. Her unit operated in a harsh, unforgiving environment. The terrain was difficult, with dense forests, rocky mountains, and treacherous rivers. The missions were dangerous, and danger was a daily companion. Many soldiers thrived on adrenaline, on the thrill of combat, but for her, the thrill was in the responsibility, the knowledge that she could save someone when others might fail. Yet, despite her dedication, the soldiers often overlooked her. They underestimated her strength, her training, and her bravery. To them, she was fragile, not fit for the intensity of real action. That made her smile sometimes. Let them think that underestimation was a kind of camouflage, a hidden advantage she had learned to use. She wasn't just physically strong. She was mentally strong, too. She had a calmness that few could match. In training simulations that simulated extreme stress, gunfire, explosions wounded comrades, while others panicked or hesitated, she remained focused. She assessed, prioritized, and acted. This ability to stay composed under pressure was one of her greatest assets, yet it was invisible to those who judged her by appearances or by the narrow roles they believed existed in the unit. But the ridicule had a cost. It weighed on her, a constant reminder that she had to fight for respect. Every mission brief, every training session, every interaction became a test, not just of skill but of patience. She learned to mask frustration, to stay professional, to let her actions speak louder than words. She quietly memorized weaknesses and strengths, her own and those of her team, and she waited. She knew the day would come when circumstances would reveal who was truly capable. Deep down, she also felt a sense of responsibility. If she proved herself, it would not just be for her. It would be for every other medic, every person underestimated because of their role, rank, or position. She carried the pride of those who had come before her and the responsibility to set an example for those who would come after. Every time someone laughed at her, every time someone called her just a medic, it reminded her of what was at stake. Not just survival, but recognition of courage in all its forms. So she continued, silently training harder, running faster, carrying heavier loads, and learning every skill that might one day make a difference. She watched the others, noted their weaknesses, their overconfidence, their assumptions. And in that observation, she found power, the kind of power that comes from preparation, skill, and an unwavering belief in oneself. She might have been ridiculed today, but she knew that respect is earned in moments of crisis, and she was ready for that moment. The soldiers could laugh. They could underestimate her. But she had a quiet confidence, one that no words of mockery could shake. She was more than just a medic. She was a force to be reckoned with, and one day, when the fire came, she would show them exactly what she was capable of. The day the mission was announced, tension ran high in the unit. Everyone knew the risks, but no one fully understood just how dangerous this particular assignment would be. It wasn't just another routine operation. It was a high-stakes mission in an area known for ambushes, treacherous terrain, and enemy patrols that never hesitated to strike first. The commander called everyone together, giving instructions, assigning roles, and laying out the strategy. As usual, she listened quietly, taking mental notes, making calculations in her mind about timing, terrain, and possible outcomes. Her peers, however, barely noticed her. To them, she was the medic, someone who treated injuries after the fact, someone who was not expected to take bold actions in the heat of battle. Their smirks and whispers lingered in the air, and a few soldiers openly doubted her ability to handle herself if things went wrong. "Stick to the back, medic," one said with a grin. Another added, "We'll need you to patch us up, not lead the charge." She smiled politely, nodding as if she agreed, but inside, a fire burned. They were blind to the truth. She was ready for more than anyone could imagine. As the team prepared their gear, she moved methodically, checking every pouch, every strap, every piece of equipment. Her attention to detail wasn't just habit. It was survival. She knew that in missions like this, small mistakes could turn deadly in seconds. She adjusted her medical kit, made sure her weapons were clean and ready, and mentally rehearsed her plan. She didn't just think about tending wounds. She thought about how to react if the team came under fire, if the commander was injured, if they were ambushed. Her mind was already running through dozens of scenarios, preparing for every possibility. The commander noticed her meticulous preparation but didn't pay much attention. He had seen her work during drills and medical exercises, but he, like the others, still thought of her primarily as a medic. That was fine with her. Underestimation had its advantages. If they believed she was limited, they would never expect her to step up when the mission truly tested everyone's limits. She welcomed the ignorance, it was her hidden strength. When the unit moved out, the terrain immediately demanded every ounce of focus. The path was narrow and rugged, lined with dense underbrush that could hide enemies, unstable rocks that could give way under weight, and rivers that cut through the land unpredictably. Most soldiers complained under their heavy packs, their boots slipping on loose stones, their movements slowed by the weight of equipment and tension. She, however, moved with surprising ease, her training giving her balance and agility that few could match. Every step she took was calculated, deliberate, as if she were already anticipating every challenge the terrain might throw at her. Along the way, she observed her team carefully. Some were nervous, others overconfident. Many underestimated the environment, walking too quickly, joking despite the danger, assuming everything would go as planned. She noted it all silently, knowing that when chaos erupted, their reactions or lack of them could cost lives. And she prepared herself to act when that moment came, to step into the gap when others faltered. Her focus wasn't just on survival. It was on being ready to take control if the situation demanded it. She visualized the worst-case scenarios. An explosion, an ambush, the commander injured, soldiers trapped. For each scenario, she formulated a response, imagining herself moving decisively, saving lives, guiding others, and overcoming impossible odds. These mental rehearsals weren't fantasies. They were a preparation for reality, and she knew that when the mission turned dangerous, thinking ahead would make all the difference. Despite her internal focus, she also maintained outward composure. She smiled at the others when they joked, answered questions politely, and carried herself with calm confidence. No one saw the rapid calculations in her mind, the courage simmering beneath her surface. They didn't know that she had spent years training for situations exactly like this, not just to heal but to survive, to protect, and if necessary, to fight. She was ready to prove that being just a medic didn't mean being powerless. As the team approached the heart of the mission area, a subtle tension grew in the air. The usual sounds of the wilderness, the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, the wind over rocks, felt ominous now, as if every noise might hide danger. The commander briefed the final details, emphasizing the importance of teamwork and vigilance. Everyone nodded, but she noticed that most of the soldiers' attention was focused outward, not inward. They were reacting to the moment, not anticipating it. She, on the other hand, was mentally running through her plan once more, imagining what would happen if the first steps of the mission didn't go as expected. And then came the unspoken understanding that this mission would demand more than just following orders. It would demand courage, quick thinking, and the ability to act decisively under fire. She felt no fear, only readiness. While others doubted her, she doubted nothing. Not her skills, not her instincts, not her ability to rise to the moment when it arrived. This calm confidence, this inner steel, would be the difference between being underestimated and becoming the hero of the mission. Every step forward strengthened her resolve. She knew that soon, everyone's perception of her role would change. They might laugh at her now, dismiss her, underestimate her, but when danger struck, she would be the one others relied on. And she was ready. The mission was moving forward smoothly, or at least it seemed that way. The unit was navigating the rough terrain, stepping carefully over rocks and fallen branches, keeping their eyes and ears open for any sign of trouble. Everyone appeared focused, but the tension in the air was unmistakable. The wilderness was quiet, too quiet, and she knew that silence in a combat zone could be the calm before a storm. Her senses were sharp, honed by years of training, and she noticed small signs that others overlooked. A broken branch here, a disturbed patch of dirt there, shadows moving too quickly to be just the wind. Suddenly, the quiet shattered. An ambush erupted from nowhere, with gunfire cracking through the trees and the sharp smell of smoke filling the air. Chaos struck the unit like a thunderbolt. Soldiers shouted orders, some froze, and others scattered instinctively, unsure of where to go or what to do. Bullets tore through the air, and explosions rocked the ground, sending dirt and debris into the air. The mission that had seemed so controlled just moments ago had turned into a nightmare. In the middle of this chaos, many soldiers panicked. Fear gripped them, and hesitation slowed their movements. Some tried to find cover, some returned fire without coordination, and others called out to their teammates, trying to figure out what had just happened. Amidst the screams and gunfire, she stayed calm. Years of training had prepared her for this moment, and she relied on every ounce of her preparation. She took a deep breath and focused, blocking out the noise and chaos, her mind sharp and clear. Her first instinct was to check the wounded. Soldiers were falling, some screaming in pain, others barely conscious. She moved quickly, weaving through flying debris and gunfire, assessing injuries, and providing immediate medical care. She stabilized those who could be helped quickly and made mental notes of those who needed more urgent attention. While others were overwhelmed by the sudden violence, she became a pillar of order in the storm, calmly taking charge of the most critical situation, keeping lives from being lost. She noticed the commander struggling. He had been caught off guard, tripped over debris, and injured in the initial attack. Some of the soldiers glanced at him but hesitated, unsure if they could reach him safely. The panic had slowed them down, and hesitation in that moment could have fatal consequences. Without thinking twice, she made her way toward him, moving faster than any of her teammates dared to. She knew that if she didn't act, things could turn tragic. Her training, her courage, and her resolve pushed her forward, ignoring the danger that surrounded her. As she approached the commander, she assessed the situation in real time. Bullets were still flying, smoke and dust made visibility poor, and the sounds of explosions were disorienting. She ducked behind a large rock, took a quick inventory of what she could use to protect herself, and then made a dash toward the commander, her focus entirely on the task at hand. Every step was calculated, every movement precise. Fear did not paralyze her, it sharpened her senses. Her teammates watched in awe, some realizing for the first time that the medic they had ridiculed was acting with more bravery than anyone else around. Once she reached the commander, she quickly assessed his injuries. He had been hit, though not critically, but he was trapped under debris, unable to move on his own. She immediately sprang into action, using both strength and technique to lift and pull him free. Her arms burned, her muscles screamed, and bullets whizzed past. But she kept going, determined not to let anything stop her. Each second mattered, and she refused to let the chaos dictate the outcome. As she dragged the commander to a safer location, she continued to coordinate with the rest of the unit. She shouted instructions, guided other soldiers, and ensured that they were providing covering fire when possible. Her leadership in that moment was quiet but powerful. She wasn't a formal commander, yet she was making decisions, taking responsibility, and influencing the outcome of the battle. Her presence turned fear into action for those who were unsure of what to do. The intensity of the ambush seemed endless. Smoke burned her eyes, dirt and debris coated her skin, and the sounds of gunfire echoed around her. Yet she didn't waver. She focused only on the task in front of her, saving the lives that depended on her, particularly the commander who had placed his trust, unknowingly, in her hands. Every step she took, every move she made, was a blend of skill, instinct, and courage. She was proving, not through words, but through action, that being just a medic was far from a limitation. By the time she had reached relative safety with the commander, the tide of the battle was beginning to shift. Her calm, decisive actions had inspired the rest of the team to regain focus. Soldiers who had panicked now moved with purpose, providing support where needed, covering positions, and tending to other wounded comrades. Her example had turned fear into action, showing the unit that courage and skill weren't defined by rank or role. In the aftermath of the ambush, as adrenaline began to subside, she took a moment to breathe and assess the situation. Her uniform was torn, her hands were scratched and bloody, and exhaustion tugged at every muscle in her body. Yet, despite the physical toll, there was a sense of triumph. She had acted when others hesitated, saved lives when others froze, and protected the commander who might have otherwise been lost. The ridicule of her peers had vanished in the face of her courage, replaced by a quiet respect that was only beginning to grow. In that intense, terrifying moment, she had shown the truth. A medic was not just someone who patched wounds. A medic could be a leader, a protector, and a hero. And as the dust settled and the sounds of gunfire faded, the realization began to dawn on everyone watching. Underestimation could be deadly, and bravery could come from the most unexpected places. The situation had become worse than anyone could have imagined. The initial chaos of the ambush had already tested every soldier's skill, but now the stakes had escalated. The commander, their leader and the person everyone looked to for guidance, was severely injured and trapped under debris. A fallen beam pinned him to the ground, and his shouts of pain were barely audible over the continuing gunfire and explosions. Many soldiers froze, unsure if they could reach him without risking their own lives. Fear and uncertainty had paralyzed the unit, leaving the commander's survival hanging in the balance. She didn't hesitate for a second. Years of preparation, training, and mental discipline kicked in, and she knew what had to be done. She was not there just to patch up wounds after the fact. She was there to act, to lead by example, and to save lives in the moment when hesitation could be deadly. Ignoring the danger around her, she darted through the chaos, weaving between flying bullets, smoke, and debris. Her eyes were focused, her mind sharp. Every step was deliberate, every movement calculated, as if she had already run through this exact scenario countless times in her mind. When she reached the commander, she quickly assessed his condition. He was conscious but in extreme pain, his leg pinned under the beam, and he could not move on his own. She realized immediately that this was no ordinary rescue. It would require strength, courage, and quick thinking. Her hands moved skillfully, first stabilizing his injured leg, then finding leverage to lift the beam just enough to free him. Bullets zipped past, and explosions rocked the ground, but she blocked out the fear and focused solely on the task. Her mind was a combination of calculation and instinct, honed through years of field experience. The soldiers around them were frozen, some too scared to move, others unsure of what to do. She shouted instructions, telling a few of the nearest soldiers where to take cover and how to assist if possible. Her voice was calm, authoritative, and unwavering, qualities that contrasted sharply with the panic around her. The team had laughed at her before, dismissed her as just a medic, but now they were watching in awe. Her bravery and skill were undeniable, and for the first time, many of them realized that underestimation could be a dangerous mistake. She tried to lift the beam herself at first, but it was heavy and awkward. She adjusted her grip, bracing her feet against a rock for stability. Her arms burned, and sweat streamed down her face, but she refused to stop. Every second counted, and she knew that if she didn't act quickly, the commander could be seriously harmed or worse. She took a deep breath, using all her strength, and managed to shift the debris enough to free his leg. Carefully, she guided him onto his side, checking for other injuries and ensuring that he could move without further damage. Even after freeing him, the danger wasn't over. The ambush was still active, and bullets continued to fly around them. She realized they needed to move to a safer position immediately. She decided to drag the commander herself, knowing that any delay could be fatal. With a combination of sheer strength, determination, and tactical thinking, she began to pull him toward a safer area. Her uniform was torn, her hands were scratched and bleeding, and exhaustion tugged at her every muscle, but she pushed on relentlessly. Every movement was precise, calculated to avoid further injury to him and herself. Along the way, she continued to direct other soldiers, telling them when to provide cover, when to assist with debris, and how to support the wounded. Her leadership, though unofficial, became the glue that held the team together during the chaos. Soldiers who had panicked earlier now followed her instructions, inspired by her courage and calm under pressure. They started acting with purpose, moving with coordination rather than fear, and the tide of the ambush slowly began to turn. The commander, injured and exhausted, was aware of her incredible effort. He could barely speak, but he tried to express his gratitude. She reassured him, keeping his morale high while ensuring his safety. Her focus never wavered, even as the environment around them remained deadly. Smoke burned her eyes, dust coated her skin, and her muscles screamed with exertion, but she refused to yield. Her actions were driven by a combination of compassion, courage, and an unshakable sense of duty. By the time she reached a relatively secure location, the immediate danger had lessened slightly, but she remained vigilant. She checked the commander thoroughly, treated his injuries as best as she could under the circumstances, and made sure he was stabilized for further evacuation. Her performance in those critical moments had completely changed the perception of her role. The same soldiers who had mocked her earlier were now silent, watching in awe as she displayed a combination of skill, courage, and leadership that none of them had expected from a medic. In those harrowing minutes, she had not only saved the commander but also inspired her entire unit. She had shown them that courage and capability were not defined by rank or title. Even in the most intense and dangerous moments, she had acted decisively, using her skills to turn a life-threatening situation into a story of survival and heroism. Her bravery had proven that a medic could be a force on the battlefield, capable of saving lives and leading under fire. As the adrenaline slowly subsided, she allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. Her hands were bruised, her uniform was torn, and her body was exhausted. Yet there was a quiet satisfaction in her heart. She had faced a situation that others had feared to approach and had emerged victorious. The ridicule, the underestimation, and the doubt of her peers had no power over her in that moment. She had proven not only to them but to herself that her courage, skill, and determination could overcome any challenge. The moment they thought the worst was over, the real test began. Smoke filled the air, carrying the sharp scent of burning wood and gunpowder, and flames flickered dangerously close to the team. The ambush had left the area in chaos, but now fire had started to spread, cutting off safe paths and forcing everyone into even greater danger. The terrain, already challenging, became unpredictable. Rocks were slippery from water, branches cracked underfoot, and the heat pressed down on everyone like a heavy weight. Soldiers were panicked again, some frozen in fear, others trying to move too quickly and losing balance. She didn't hesitate. She had trained for moments like this, when survival depended on courage, skill, and quick thinking. While others were struggling to cope with the fire and smoke, she moved with precision and confidence. Every step was deliberate, avoiding fallen branches and dangerous embers, her eyes scanning for the safest path. She kept the commander close, making sure he could move without worsening his injuries. Her hands gripped his arm tightly as she guided him through the smoke, her mind constantly calculating the next move. The fire roared around them, growing with every passing second. Flames danced on the edges of the dry underbrush, threatening to trap them. The heat was intense, making it hard to breathe and blurring her vision. But she didn't falter. She had faced tough conditions before, but this was different. It was a combination of human danger and natural hazard. The gunfire had already proven deadly. Now the fire added another layer of risk. She adjusted her grip, lowered herself slightly to reduce exposure, and began dragging the commander across a safer path she had spotted. Her determination was matched only by her intelligence. She understood that rushing blindly would be fatal. She scanned the area constantly, noting which spots were safe from fire and which were not. When she saw a burning branch threatening to fall, she shifted the commander's position instantly, avoiding injury. When smoke thickened in one area, she led him around it, even pulling other soldiers along when they hesitated. Her actions were a mix of courage, skill, and instinct, showing that she was not only brave but also smart under pressure. The soldiers who had mocked her before were now watching in awe. Some began to follow her lead, helping to clear obstacles, creating paths through the smoke, and covering each other as they moved. They realized, too late for words but not too late for action, that the medic they had underestimated was now the one keeping everyone alive. Her courage had sparked a chain reaction, inspiring her team to act decisively. Even in the most intense danger, her calmness became a lifeline for those around her. The commander, injured and struggling, relied entirely on her. Every step, every pull, every careful movement mattered. She had to keep him balanced, shield him from falling debris, and make sure he didn't panic. The fire crackled dangerously close, and sparks flew over them, but she refused to stop. Exhaustion tugged at her muscles, sweat ran down her face, and her lungs burned from the heat and smoke, yet she kept moving. Every second counted, and she knew that hesitation could be fatal for both of them. At one point, a burning tree branch fell dangerously near them, and she acted instantly, pushing the commander out of its path just in time. The explosion of heat and falling debris could have killed them both, but her quick thinking and agility saved the moment. She continued dragging him forward, all the while guiding her team through the safest route she could find. Every movement, every decision, was a mix of bravery and intelligence, proving that she could handle situations far beyond what anyone had expected of a medic. The chaos seemed endless, but her focus never wavered. She maintained constant awareness, checking on the commander's injuries, scanning for new dangers, and directing other soldiers to follow her path. She became a moving center of calm in a world filled with fire, smoke, and confusion. Her leadership was quiet but powerful, showing that real courage didn't always come from guns or rank. It came from action, skill, and an unwavering determination to protect life. Eventually, she found a slightly safer area, shielded from the worst of the fire. She paused just long enough to catch her breath, wipe sweat and soot from her eyes, and assess the commander. His injuries were still serious, but she had managed to get him through the most dangerous stretch. Other soldiers gathered around, finally recognizing her as more than just a medic. Her bravery and quick thinking had saved lives, including the commander's, and had turned a terrifying situation into one where survival was possible. She didn't stop there. Knowing the mission wasn't over and that the fire could spread again at any moment, she began planning the next move. She coordinated with the team, guiding them to safer spots, tending to the wounded, and ensuring the commander was secure. Her actions transformed panic into order, fear into action. By the time the fire had calmed slightly, everyone knew that they owed their survival to her courage and skill. In those harrowing minutes, she proved that bravery could not be measured by rank or role. The fire had been fierce, the situation deadly, but she had moved through it with intelligence, skill, and heart. She had become the hero her unit never expected, and in doing so, she had completely changed how everyone saw her. The soldiers who had ridiculed her were now silent, watching in awe, realizing that courage could come from the most unexpected person. The danger wasn't over yet. Even though they had managed to get out of the worst of the fire, the battlefield was still chaotic. Smoke hung thick in the air, the sound of distant gunfire echoed, and the ground was unstable from debris and fallen trees. The commander, injured and exhausted, struggled to move on his own, and the other soldiers were still shaken from the ambush and the fire. Many were unsure what to do next, but she didn't hesitate. Every muscle, every thought, every ounce of her focus went into one thing: completing the rescue. She adjusted her grip on the commander, making sure his injuries weren't aggravated as she prepared to drag him across uneven terrain. Her hands were scraped and burned from falling debris and embers, her uniform torn, and her body screaming with fatigue, but she refused to slow down. The adrenaline coursing through her veins kept her moving, sharpened her senses, and gave her the strength she needed. Every second mattered. If they didn't get the commander to safety soon, he could worsen, or worse, another attack could hit them. As she moved, she assessed the safest path in real time. Fallen branches, burning debris, slippery rocks, and hidden holes threatened every step. She calculated each movement carefully, leading the commander with her body low to avoid exposure, pulling and guiding him while keeping an eye out for other dangers. The fire still blazed around them, sparks flying dangerously close, but she refused to let fear control her. Her focus was complete, her mind a combination of instinct and precise calculation. Other soldiers finally began to follow her lead. Inspired by her courage, they stepped up to help, clearing obstacles, guiding the way, and providing cover where needed. Those who had mocked her before were now silent, their eyes wide with respect. Her actions had transformed the panic around them into coordinated effort. She wasn't commanding them officially, but her example was enough. Her bravery had become the anchor that steadied the team in the chaos. The commander, although conscious, was in great pain. Every movement caused him discomfort, but he trusted her completely. She spoke to him in calm, steady tones, reassuring him that he would be okay, that they were going to make it through this. Her voice was steady, a beacon of confidence amidst the chaos. It wasn't just physical strength that she was using, it was mental strength. She was keeping morale high, keeping fear at bay, and giving hope to everyone around her. At one point, they encountered a particularly dangerous stretch, a narrow path with fire on both sides and uneven, rocky ground. She knew that any misstep could be fatal. Taking a deep breath, she positioned herself, lifted the commander carefully, and slowly navigated through the area. Her muscles ached, but she moved with precision, keeping him safe. She guided him over rocks, around burning embers, and past obstacles that would have frozen any unprepared soldier in fear. Her focus never wavered. The soldiers around her began to realize just how skilled and courageous she was. Those who had previously laughed at her role as just a medic now followed her without question, trusting her judgment, inspired by her actions. She had transformed their fear into action, showing them that courage didn't come from rank or role. It came from heart, skill, and determination. She had become the guiding force in a situation where leadership was desperately needed. Finally, she found a slightly safer clearing, shielded from the immediate danger of fire and falling debris. She paused just long enough to assess the commander's condition and make sure he could continue moving without worsening his injuries. Other soldiers quickly moved to assist, following her instructions to stabilize him and provide support. In those tense moments, her role as a leader and protector became undeniable. She had taken responsibility when everyone else hesitated, acted decisively under extreme danger, and had brought them all closer to safety. Even after the immediate danger was past, she didn't allow herself to relax. She continued to guide the commander, ensuring he was stable and prepared for evacuation. She treated minor injuries, reassured him, and kept the other soldiers coordinated. Her attention to detail and ability to stay calm under pressure ensured that no one else would be harmed. She had turned what could have been a catastrophic situation into one where survival was possible, and she had done it through skill, courage, and determination. By the time they reached a fully safe area, the soldiers around her were silent, exhausted, and awestruck. The same people who had ridiculed her had witnessed firsthand her bravery, intelligence, and leadership. Her actions had saved lives, not only the commanders but also the lives of those who followed her lead. She had proven that a medic was far more than someone who treated injuries after the fact. A medic could be a hero, a protector, and a guiding force in the most dangerous moments. As she finally allowed herself a brief moment to breathe, sweat, dirt, and ash covering her body, she felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. Exhaustion tugged at her every muscle, but there was pride in knowing that she had faced incredible danger, acted decisively, and saved lives. The ridicule and doubt of her peers no longer mattered. In those moments of fire, chaos, and fear, she had proven her worth, showing that courage and skill could not be measured by rank or title. In completing the rescue, she had not only saved the commander, but also earned the respect and admiration of her unit. She had demonstrated that true bravery comes from action, heart, and determination. The soldiers who had once laughed at her role would never look at her the same way again. She had shown them that in moments of life and death, courage and skill can emerge from the most unexpected people, and that being just a medic could mean being the one who changes everything. The chaos had finally subsided. Smoke lingered in the air, the sound of distant gunfire faded, and the battlefield, though scarred and dangerous, had grown quieter. The soldiers were catching their breath, checking themselves and their comrades for injuries, and trying to process what had just happened. Amid the exhaustion and relief, the commander sat, leaning against a rock, still in pain from his injuries. His eyes scanned the team and finally they landed on her, the medic who had risked everything to save him. For a long moment, there was silence. The soldiers who had mocked her before, who had whispered and laughed behind her back, were now quiet. Their disbelief was palpable. They had seen her act in ways they had never expected. Fearless, decisive, and incredibly skilled. She had navigated fire, smoke, bullets, and chaos, saving the commander's life and guiding the team through danger. The mockery that had followed her for weeks or months vanished, replaced by astonishment and respect. They could no longer dismiss her as just a medic. The commander, still catching his breath, struggled to find the words. He was in pain, exhausted, and deeply aware of how close he had come to a life-threatening situation. Yet his gratitude was immense. He looked at her with a mixture of awe and respect and said words that she had never heard from him before. Praise and recognition. He acknowledged her courage, her skill, and the critical role she had played in ensuring that not only he but many others survived. It was not a small commendation. It was a public, undeniable validation of everything she had done. Around them, the soldiers began to murmur among themselves. Some admitted quietly, others less so, that they had been wrong. The medic they had laughed at, dismissed, and underestimated had acted with bravery and intelligence far beyond what anyone had anticipated. The team had been inspired by her example. Her courage had turned fear into action, hesitation into determination. The ridicule that had once haunted her felt like a distant memory now, replaced by the undeniable truth of her abilities. She didn't boast. She didn't seek attention. She had acted out of duty, instinct, and compassion, not to earn recognition. But seeing the respect in the eyes of her commander and fellow soldiers brought a sense of satisfaction she had never experienced before. It was a quiet victory, a proof of her worth that no words of mockery could ever diminish again. For the first time, those who had doubted her had to confront the reality that courage, leadership, and skill could come from the most unexpected people. The commander called the team together to acknowledge her officially. He spoke of her bravery, her decisive action in the face of danger, and the way she had led by example without hesitation. He described the moments of the ambush, the fire, and the rescue, highlighting her role at every critical point. As he spoke, heads turned toward her, eyes wide with admiration, and some soldiers even nodded in silent agreement. For them, this was a turning point in their understanding of courage and respect. The medic herself felt a mix of emotions. Relief that the commander was safe, pride in having performed under unimaginable pressure, satisfaction that her skills and dedication had been recognized, and a quiet joy in knowing that she had changed the perception of her peers, not just for herself, but for future medics who might face similar doubts. She realized that bravery was not measured by rank, by title, or by the opinions of others. It was measured by action, by the ability to stay calm and effective when the stakes were highest. The soldiers who had once laughed at her began to approach her, some hesitant, some openly, offering apologies or quiet acknowledgments of their earlier mistake. The mockery that had once felt heavy now seemed absurd in comparison to the reality they had just witnessed. Her courage had forced a reevaluation of assumptions, showing that heroism can appear in anyone willing to act decisively, no matter what role they hold. The commander, still struggling with pain, personally thanked her. His words were sincere, filled with the gravity of what had happened. He recognized that without her quick thinking, strength, and courage, the outcome could have been very different. The team listened carefully, absorbing the weight of his praise. In that moment, her role transformed in their eyes. She was no longer just a medic. She was a leader, a hero, and the one who had held the unit together when chaos threatened to destroy it. As the unit began to regroup, the impact of her actions was clear. Soldiers moved more purposefully, inspired by what they had seen. The respect she earned was more than just words. It was reflected in the way her peers now treated her, how they consulted her, followed her lead, and relied on her judgment. Her actions had left a mark not just on the battlefield but on the minds and hearts of everyone present. Even as the adrenaline faded and exhaustion set in, she remained alert, ensuring the commander was stable and that the team was organized for the next steps. She had demonstrated something far greater than skill or bravery. It was the power of calm, decisive action under pressure, and the ability to inspire respect through deeds rather than words. By the end of the day, one truth was clear. Her courage had rewritten the story of her role, proving that heroism cannot be limited by labels, and that the most underestimated person in a room can become its greatest strength. The mission was finally over, and the battlefield, though still scarred and smoky, had grown quiet. The fire had been contained, the injured were being attended to, and the surviving soldiers were regrouping. For most, the events of the day would linger as a memory of fear, chaos, and near tragedy. But for her, the medic who had risked everything, it was a moment that would define her legacy. She had saved the commander, guided her unit through fire and ambush, and proven that courage, skill, and leadership could come from the most unexpected place. As she looked around, she noticed the shift in the team's demeanor. Those who had mocked her, dismissed her, and underestimated her were now different. Their eyes held respect and admiration. Their words were cautious but sincere, and many approached her with nods, handshakes, and quiet acknowledgments. What had been disbelief and ridicule had transformed into recognition and honor. She had shown them that labels and roles didn't define a person's ability to act decisively when it mattered most. The commander, still recovering from his injuries, sought her out personally. His gratitude was profound, not just because she had saved his life, but because she had taken control in a moment when fear had paralyzed others. He praised her courage, her quick thinking, and her leadership under extreme pressure. His words were not formal or rehearsed. They were heartfelt and honest, carrying the weight of someone who had faced death and survived because of her. The other soldiers listened, absorbing the gravity of what had happened and the truth of her actions. In the days following the mission, the story of what she had done spread through the unit. She became more than a medic. She became an example of what it meant to act with courage, intelligence, and compassion under pressure. Her actions challenged long-held assumptions about rank, role, and capability. Soldiers who had doubted her now sought her advice, learned from her techniques, and relied on her judgment in situations they might have previously dismissed as beyond her scope. She had not only earned respect but had shifted the culture of her unit, even if only slightly, toward valuing skill and courage over preconceived notions. She herself reflected on the events with a quiet sense of pride. She didn't seek recognition or fame. She acted out of duty and compassion. Yet, seeing the impact of her actions, the lives saved, the inspiration provided, and the change in perception among her peers, was profoundly satisfying. She realized that heroism isn't about glory or applause. It's about action, about stepping forward when others hesitate, and about making the difference that matters most. In her heart, she understood that she had done exactly that. Her story became a lesson in perseverance and quiet strength. To those who had underestimated her, it was a reminder that assumptions can be dangerous. To her peers and future medics, it was a model of courage and leadership, showing that one person's determination can influence an entire team. She had proven that a role does not limit one's impact, and that even in a world where titles and rank often dictate perception, true ability shines through action. The soldiers' respect translated into changes in their interactions. Orders were followed with renewed focus, teamwork improved, and trust was stronger than ever. The unit had faced near catastrophe, yet through her bravery, they had survived. Her actions had given them confidence, not just in her, but in each other. They realized that leadership and heroism were not confined to rank. They could emerge from anyone willing to act decisively in the face of danger. Even as the adrenaline faded and the physical toll of the mission settled in, she remained alert. She checked on the injured, coordinated with her team, and ensured that everyone was safe. Her calm under pressure had not only saved lives, but had created an environment where her unit could recover, learn, and grow stronger. Her presence had been a stabilizing force, one that left a lasting impact on the minds and hearts of those around her. In the quiet moments after the mission, she thought about the lessons learned. Courage isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet and determined. Strength isn't always about physical power. It's about focus, skill, and the ability to act under pressure. Respect isn't given freely. It is earned through consistent action, often when no one else believes it is possible. She had embodied all of these truths, and her actions would be remembered by those who witnessed them. The legacy she left was profound. She had transformed from just a medic into a symbol of bravery, skill, and leadership. Her actions challenged assumptions, inspired confidence, and reshaped perceptions. Soldiers would tell stories of her courage for years, passing on the lesson that true heroes are not always the ones at the front, shouting orders or firing guns. They can be the ones who move through danger calmly, decisively, and with a heart focused on saving others. In the end, the mission had tested her in ways that went far beyond training or expectation. She had faced chaos, fire, and mortal danger, yet emerged not only unbroken but triumphant. Her courage had changed lives, saved lives, and transformed the way her peers saw her and her role. She had proven an essential truth. Bravery, skill, and leadership are not defined by rank or title. They are defined by action. And in that moment, she had become the living embodiment of that truth, leaving a legacy that would inspire long after the smoke cleared and the battlefield was empty.